Tuesday when I cover it during the lecture, so hopefully it'll be clearer then. I actually told you a little bit about it today, but I didn't tell you the whole story. So what I taught you about today was this part over here. You've got muscle fibers, and then they bundle themselves together and are called fascicles, and then all of the fascicles arrange themselves to be the entire muscle. What I didn't tell you was you can actually go smaller than the muscle fibers, and you've got something called myofibrils, and then you can go even smaller and have myofilaments. By the way, what does myo mean?
Muscle.
It means muscle. You're going to see a lot of myo. You're also going to see sarco, which I think also means muscle. Anyway, so the big picture is you've got these really tiny things called myofilaments, or sometimes they just call them filaments. It's the same thing. And there's thin filaments that you'll learn about and thick filaments that you'll learn about. You put a bunch of myofilaments together, you get these organelle things called myofibrils. Then you've got several myofibrils inside of each muscle cell. Then you put a bunch of muscle cells together, you get a fascicle, and then you put all the fascicles together, and you get the entire muscle. So make sure you know that for the lab practical. Like I said, it'll be clearer on Tuesday because I'm actually going to cover it during lecture. The other thing I'm going to cover on Tuesday is the anatomy, or I'm going to talk about skeletal muscle fibers in a lot more detail. Again, fiber is just another name for cell. So skeletal muscle fiber, skeletal muscle cell, it means the same thing. But I'm going to go through the anatomy of the skeletal muscle cells, and I'm going to go through their physiology. So if this is confusing right now, just try not to get too worried because it'll make more sense on Tuesday, but let me show you this. So this, if I can back up enough. This is what's called our neuromuscular junction model, okay? If you turn this thing around, actually, I probably should just put it up there. It's almost tough to get it seen in here. This whole thing, I just can't figure out how to place it. This whole thing represents one skeletal muscle cell. All right, hold on a second, this is annoying me. All right, so here's the model. This whole big thing is one skeletal muscle cell, or if you want to call it a muscle fiber, it means the same thing. But this thing coming in from the side is the axon of a motor neuron, okay? For your skeletal muscles to contract, you need to send a signal from a neuron there to make them contract. So that's the motor, that's the end, the axon. These are like the synaptic end bulbs of the motor neuron, and then they connect with the muscle cell to make it contract. This area in here, and I'll put this on, that's called the neuromuscular junction. The neuromuscular junction is where the synapse is between the motor neuron and the muscle cell, basically. And there's some different parts that you're going to have to know about it. It's right. So, what you're looking at here then, these little things up here represent sort of the synaptic end bulbs of the motor neuron. The little green dots that you're seeing, those would be synaptic vesicles that contain neurotransmitter. So it's just like synapses that you learned before, but instead of being between a neuron and another neuron, it's between a neuron and a muscle cell. In the case of skeletal muscle, the neurotransmitter that's always inside of the synaptic vesicles is acetylcholine. Okay? The little thing in red would represent the synaptic gap or the synaptic cleft, right? That's the little space. Go a little closer. And then in white would be like the cell membrane of the muscle cell. All right. So these little guys are going to get, when you send a signal down the motor neuron, these little guys will get exocytosed. They'll release the acetylcholine into the synaptic cleft, and then that's going to travel across the synaptic cleft. It's going to bind to little receptors that are on the cell membrane of the muscle cell. Okay? Another thing that you're going to learn is that the cell membrane of the muscle cells, it has a special name. They call it the sarcolemma. It just means the cell membrane of a muscle cell. So this is the sarcolemma. The whole thing that surrounds the outside of the muscle cell is the sarcolemma. the part of the sarcolemma that's actually where the neuron, where the motor neuron comes in, has a special name. You call it the motor end plate. Okay, you know, you can have really long skeletal muscle cells, but there'll only be one spot where the neuron actually hooks up with it. So if you look at the sarcolemma in that area, they call it the motor end plate. What else? Synaptic vesicles, okay, fine. So again, this whole thing is known as the neuromuscular junction. Little green dots are the synaptic vesicles that have acetylcholine inside. The red space represents the synaptic cleft, and then the white area is the sarcolemma. And in this area, it's specifically referred to as the motor end plate. All right, enough said. The rest of it, you're going to also need to know the anatomy of the entire muscle cell. Let's see, I'm tempted to do it. Let's do this. All right, so here it is, like from above, right? Here it is from the sides. Now, what you're seeing then is like a cross-section of a skeletal muscle cell. These little tiny dots that are in here, the little tiny dots represent the filaments, okay? And I don't know if you can see, but some of the dots are bigger than others, okay? Obviously, this is because we cut it on cross-section. They're not actually dots. They're long things. They're long rope-like things. But the big dots represent the thick filaments. The smaller dots, like over here and there, those represent the thin filaments. So the dots represent the filaments. Each one of these things, okay, so there's like 1, 2, 3, 4. Those are the myofibrils, okay? And then on this particular model, it looks like they have about 6 myofibrils. If you put all the myofibrils together, then you get the entire muscle fiber or the entire muscle cell. So again, this model is showing you one muscle cell, about 6 myofibrils, and then inside the myofibrils are all the little myofilaments, just to get your bearings. All right, some other parts you're supposed to see on this. This will be a lot better, I think, on Tuesday after I've actually talked about it, but for now, just bear with me. That's the best place to start here. Okay. Again, the outer cell membrane is called the sarcolemma. The inner cytoplasm, which is really just like cytoplasm in any other cell, has a special name. They call it sarcoplasm. You see the trend here, right? They're putting sarco between or in front of a lot of these words. The nucleus on this model, I'm going to show you skeletal muscle slides in a second, but skeletal muscles have their nuclei pushed off to the side. So they have these, it's like they're so, skeletal muscle cells are so filled up with these myofibrils that it kind of forces the nuclei to be off to the side. So like on this model, this is one of the nuclei that's pushed off to the side over there. Okay. What are these little guys? Those are mitochondria, right? Why do you have a lot of mitochondria in muscle cells?
A lot of ATP.
You need a lot of ATP, right? It requires a lot of energy. So these are the little mitochondria. There's some more mitochondria inside there. This white area is known as the sarcoplasmic reticulum. Okay, it's a lot like the endoplasmic reticulum in other cells. It just got that funny sarco name. The key thing with this is that it contains, when a muscle's relaxed, there's going to be a lot of calcium inside of these sarcoplasmic reticulums. When a motor neuron stimulates a muscle cell to contract, it's ultimately going to cause the sarcoplasmic reticulum to release the calcium into the sarcoplasm, and that's going to cause the contraction to happen. But you'll learn all about that on Tuesday. The ends of the sarcoplasmic reticulum, like right here or right over here, they form these structures called terminal cisterns. And if you have 2 terminal cisterns, in between them is something called a transverse tubule or a T-tubule. The T-tubules are important for making sure that the electrical signal that's created by the motor neuron actually reaches deep inside of the muscle cell. So that's kind of their job. When you have this situation, when you have one T-tubule in the middle and then two of the terminal cisterns on either side of it, they have a name for it. They call it a triad. So here's a triad, there's a triad, there's another triad down there. Something else we're going to talk all kinds of crazy length about are something called sarcomeres. Sarcomeres are sort of the organizational units inside of the myofibrils. So again, each one of these things represents a myofibril. If you go into a myofibril, there are these repeating segments called sarcomeres, and that's actually what causes skeletal muscle to have its stripes. It's these repeating sarcomeres. On this model, a sarcomere begins here at the pink zone and runs to the other pink zone. So between from there to there would be a sarcomere. The pink things themselves are called Z-discs. Running between them, you know what, I don't know if I even really want to get into this stuff yet because it's a little tough to talk. You know what, I'm not gonna worry about that so much yet, but there's a whole alphabet soup name for these different things. There's Z-discs and I-bands and M-lines and things like that, and I think it'll make a lot more sense you know, on Tuesday, so I'm just going to hold on from that for a while. Let me move ahead and talk about the specific muscles then, and I'll use the muscle man guy, because he shows most of the muscles, but it's also easier for me to like put under the scope up here instead of trying to like manipulate it. So again, go to the last page, wherever it is, and just focus on the muscles that are listed on that last page. So let me go through in here, and I'll try to go close up on some of these, and I'll try to adjust my brightness so it's not too bright. All right. Okay, so here we go. What do you suppose this little muscle is here? That's the masseter muscle. All right, this happens to be, I don't know why the hell they put this on here, but that's a gland, that's your parotid gland. Like, are they like paid off by the gland company? Why did they put that on there? But anyway, that's the masseter muscle. That's it originates on your zygomatic arch, it inserts on your mandible, and that's what's gonna cause you to close your mouth when you're like chewing food. Okay? The next muscle to be aware of up here is this guy. What's that guy? That's the sternocleidomastoid muscle. It originates on the sternum and on the clavicle, and then it inserts on the mastoid process of the temporal bone, and that's going to cause you to, if one side contracts, you'll turn your head to the side. If both contract at the same time, you'll kind of bow, you'll like flex your head. Okay? What you can't see on this model, and I think Professor Bolano has it. Unfortunately, I don't. Do I have one up here? Oh. Well, all right. I kind of got a thing here. Hold on. What's this muscle here? All right, that's the diaphragm. I don't think you'll have a hard time identifying the diaphragm. It's your main breathing muscle. When it contracts, it goes down and you inhale. When it relaxes, it comes naturally back up into place and you exhale. So again, I'd have to cut this guy open to show you that. External intercostal muscles, it's not deep enough on here to show you those, but those are little muscles that run, what does inter mean? Between, what does costal mean? That means ribs. So the intercostal muscles, I'm just looking to see if, yeah, none of these models have it. You can look on pictures, but the external intercostals run between the ribs. So you'd have external intercostals running like that, all between all of the ribs. Okay? And they run sort of in this direction. And when they contract, they essentially pull your rib cage upward, which also works to expand or increase the size of your thoracic cavity, which pulls the lungs with it, which causes you to inhale. So the external intercostals and the diaphragm, they work together. When they contract, they cause you to inhale. When they relax, you'll naturally exhale. What's this guy here? That's the rectus abdominis muscle, okay? When it contracts, what do you suppose you're going to do? You're going to flex your trunk, right? Like you're bowing, okay? So that's that guy. The external oblique is this guy.